There are more solutions for styling your web applications now than there have ever been in the past, but at the same time, the decision process has gotten both easier and harder. Things are weird in CSS and web nowadays, and I tried my best to cover this way back, like over 2 years ago. If you've been around for long enough, you might recognize the pre-stash Theo in the old apartment that I used to shoot my videos from back before I had my studio. Sorry, my audio played there. For those who remember OG Theo, thanks for sticking through all of this time. For those who haven't, I was really proud of this video. This is commonly cited as my best video. People bring it up with me all the time at various events. The reason is I did my best to break down my mental model for how these different style solutions work and how to think about them all. This was also before ShadCN was a thing, and also before Tailwind had fully become the default that we all lean on like we do today. Things have changed a lot since then, but it's also kind of confirmed the things I was pushing for back at the time. I am very excited to cover how things have changed and do my best to modernize the takes I had in this video so you can have the most useful knowledge about styles and a good decision-making framework for picking the right solutions to your problems. But one other thing has changed since I recorded this video. I have a team I have to pay, and I'm not going to charge you guys for that. So instead, we're going to take a quick break for today's sponsor and get right back to it. Today's sponsor is another one of those products that I actually cannot imagine running my businesses without. It's PostHog, the only analytics platform that hasn't driven me mad. They're not just analytics, they're an all-in-one suite of useful product tools, things that you almost certainly are going to need for your business. From surveys to feature flags to session replays to experiments and so much more. I'm going to give a rapid fire list of some of my favorite things I only recently learned about PostHog that have been making my life significantly easier. Linking Stripe as a source so that you can get all your Stripe data in an actual useful view. The Stripe starter report template that actually shows you all of that Stripe data so you know how much money you're actually making, since Stripe doesn't make it particularly easy to figure that out. Automatic LLM observability so you can see how much money each of the AI models and generations your users are doing actually cost you. I spent a bunch of time trying to configure this myself before I realized I had a product for it, and it was literally one click. All for free, by the way. We haven't covered anything that costs money yet somehow. A recent favorite they just introduced is Max AI, this little hedgehog helper hanging out there that you can ask questions about your data and get actual useful answers because it has access to all of your analytics. Product analytics, web analytics, data warehouse, Stripe, whatever else. By the way, Stripe is far from the only one of those built-in integrations. HubSpot, Zendesk, Postgres, MySQL, Azure, Snowflake, Vitali, ChargeBee, BigQuery, S3, R2, GCS, Azure. So many additional things. It's kind of insane. I've been using PostHog for 4 years now, and I keep being blown away. Did I mention it's open source yet? It's open. What? Yeah, you really should give these guys a shot. And by the way, you're almost certainly not going to have to pay them anything. 90% of the companies using PostHog are using them for free. You get 1 million events a month for free. What are you waiting for? Go give it a shot today at soydev.link/PostHog. Let's start by grabbing from my original video here my take on the different types of UI libraries. They changed the default color on the Excalibur. Either that or I'm just dealing with crappy compression. Either are equally likely. So the 3 types of UI libraries that I had identified were extensions of CSS. I said things like Sass, Less, and Tailwind. There are behavioral libraries, things like Headless UI, the now much more popular Radix, and the now, I think, much less popular React Aria. There have been some additional ones since then. But then there are also style systems, things like Tailwind UI, probably the best example. But stuff has changed a lot since then. The diagram that I had drawn, and I think is still a pretty good way to visualize this, attempts to break this into a handful of different sections. So I called this top section CSS++, things that are extending CSS. There is the headless behaviors section, and then there is styles themselves. For something like Bootstrap, which if you're young enough to not know, Bootstrap is a very popular style solution built by Twitter back in the day. And if you look at their homepage, you'll immediately be like, oh yeah, I've seen a lot of websites that look like that. It's this particular top bar, the 12-column system. So it did prescribe a way of building and handled things like mobile responsiveness better than other solutions. Like if I go like that, it knows to flatten that into a column instead of 2 sections. Pretty cool back in the day. Good take from chat. Bootstrap got killed by CSS Flex. That is fair. And since I'm doing a video about 2025 style solutions, Bootstrap probably shouldn't be mentioned at all, but I think it's worth understanding where we came from. I also mentioned Radix. Radix is one of the key pieces that is built deeply into ShadCN. Radix UI is an open source component library, but it doesn't have theming built in. So the way a button looks, the way a dropdown looks, none of that is really built into Radix. That's your problem to solve. It does now provide some themes built in, but for the most part, point of Radix is the primitives, the building blocks for your design system. So they have a dialogue component, but the dialogue component doesn't have styles associated with it. That's your problem. It handles all of the complexity of focus control, accessibility, rendering the element at the right time, handling different standards for web stuff, making keyboard navigation work how it's supposed to. All of those types of things is what it does for you. And it does a great job at that too. But you're either going to have to pull in Radix themes or solve those theming problems yourself. And then we have Tailwind, everyone's favorite. Tailwind, I've slowly grown to accept, is partially a style solution because it has opinions about things like padding and gives you a system for it. It's not a system that prescribes a specific look to it, but it's a system that makes it less likely things conflict. And while ergonomically, Tailwind really does feel like a different syntax for writing CSS, not like a framework, some of the directions it pushes you towards are pretty framework-y in a way. Since I filmed that first video, I read Refactoring UI, which is the book by the creators of Tailwind that they wrote before they had created Tailwind. And what I realized was that a lot of the things they had talked about in this book are now built into Tailwind itself. This is a great read as a developer that's bad at design. This helped me a ton with my mental model for how design systems and good design language works. It's more expensive than it probably should be, especially considering how old it is, but there's a lot of good info here, and if you can get your employer to pay for it, worth considering. I enjoyed my read of it a lot, got a lot of value from it, but it helped me understand that Tailwind is a CSS improvement that is very slightly a styled, opinionated solution, not because Tailwind itself is full of really hard opinions, but because it makes it harder to do things you're not supposed to. Like you have P1, P2, P4, P6, and it has a system where it misses certain values intentionally to make sure everything's a ratio when you do padding. But then they added this with the bracket syntax. The addition of the bracket syntax takes Tailwind from here and immediately moves it back there because the strictness of the system has been entirely foregone now that you can inline whatever the fuck you want to do here instead. And they even went as far as removing the hard-coded values that had their curve up. And now you can do P1.5, P3.7. I don't know how open it is, but I do know 1.5 is valid now. There might be some rules about what is and isn't. Because Tailwind is now compiled, the Tailwind compiler reads through your code, and based on where the CSS is in the classes that you define, it will generate the right CSS output. It means they can just kind of do whatever here, which kills the style system side of Tailwind, in my opinion. It's only 0.25 increments. And here is kind of where my problem is. Now it went from a thing where it's prescribed with very strict rules to weird esoteric ones, like anything that is like a fraction of 0.25 is good. That's weird. I don't like that. But at the same time, it does really push Tailwind towards this extension of CSS side and away from being a style system itself, which overall I think is the right call because Tailwind is one piece of a puzzle now, where you have Tailwind as the thing we use to write better CSS, to have a primitive that is more valuable to us, especially for component design and architecture, than vanilla CSS. If you don't agree, you either don't work at scale or haven't watched my other videos about it. Tailwind is a massive win for large projects with many components. Component systems were inherently conflicting with CSS because you had to define your components in two places and make sure they overlapped and interfaced together properly, which they almost never did. And if you think that vanilla CSS is really easy and everybody's got skill issues if they're using Tailwind, I would love to audit your app because I guarantee there are at least a couple dozen CSS classes that you're shipping to your users that aren't being used. So it is what it is. Tailwind is winning really hard for a reason. I have enough content covering it. You can go watch that if you're interested. Tailwind kind of won. Because of that, the innovation in the CSS++ space has gotten weird. There are still things that are super impressive, but they're more specific now. StyleX is one of my favorite examples, which also didn't exist when I did my last video. It was built by Facebook and by Naman in particular, who's one of the most talented style and web dev people I know. because they had very specific problems that Tailwind and things like it were not solving. The Thinking in StyleX page has really rewired my brain and how I think about style stuff. Highly recommend reading this if you're as nerdy as I am about these things, because it's so deeply appreciative of Tailwind and what makes it good, but also recognizes that the way it's constructed cannot work great at the scale and size of what Facebook is trying to do. It finds a middle ground that's really cool. And it goes further than that because Naman is working on a compiler that will turn your Tailwind into StyleX. But StyleX is also CSS and JS, which has its own many potential issues, depending on how you're building SSR, all those types of things. It's a balancing act. But on that topic, one of the biggest things that has changed, which I kind of called at a time, CSS and JS is dead. I've seen some really stupid takes from people in the CSS and JS space, the creators of all of these weird frameworks and tools that let you do all of your CSS as properties and like objects being passed around in the JavaScript layer and then applied randomly and generated on the fly. We moved really far away from this. Now, the styles that are being used in your app aren't being generated by JavaScript at runtime. They are, for the most part, being generated as a CSS file at build time. And the only thing happening at runtime is the class names are being swapped on the elements. I've seen straight up crazy conspiracy theories being spread that this was the Facebook React team's decision in order to kill these libraries they didn't like because they're invested in Tailwind. And if the Tailwind wins, they make a bunch of money. That's literally not how any of this works. Tailwind is a privately held thing by its creators. There is no investment going on there, no money exchanging hands. And Facebook is one of the only companies that is still investing in doing CSS and JS. So yeah, if people are saying that this is a conspiracy, they don't know what the fuck's going on. Ignore them. I love when people have these specific types of red flags. There are certain statements certain people make that make it so obvious they don't know what they're talking about that you could ignore them from that point going forward. And the people who say CSS and JS isn't dead, it's a conspiracy being spread by big React to make more Blue framework successful, it's very safe to just hit the mute button on those people because they will never say anything of value, even if they're building libraries that people think might be good in the future but aren't. There's a certain framework author I'm talking about here that I may or may not have covered in the past, and his takes on this are so bad that I often have to unteach them to my audience. So yeah, be cautious of who you're listening to. Some of them haven't shipped in years. One other good thing to call out here, thank you, Gabriel. There are other attempts to learn from Tailwind. There are things like Panda. There was Windy CSS for a while. I think this one is dead. Yeah, it's sunset now. Oh yeah, Uno is one there. That was the other one I was trying to find. Uno is also very, very similar, super inspired by Tailwind. Really cool. Tokenami is another super cool one. I'm so thankful seeing the effort to make type-safe design system solutions. It is CSS and JS. It is still very early, but it's super cool. It lets you write composable, variable-based variants for styles on things that are computed at runtime really cheaply and are type-safe in dev time so you don't make dumb mistakes. It's super cool. I'm genuinely hyped with what these guys are doing. Jenna's one of the smartest devs that I know, even if she's not willing to admit it. The stuff going on here is dope, and it makes a lot of sense that this is stemming out of the Radix world, because when you realize the power of Radix, because, you know, you built Radix, you know that this is where you live, and all you see is the chaos going on here, as well as the chaos going on here, and you desperately wish for ways to solve it, which is why you end up making your own extension of CSS, which is what she did. It's also why Radix has themes now, because they realized that by being in just one of these sections, they aren't able to be used by people who need the other things too, unless they know to combine it with other stuff. This was the hypothesis and like the core point of my previous video, that these more modular tools are much better, but they also require more from you as the end developer to assemble them. There were really popular solutions like Material UI, not the Material theme, nothing to do with each other. Material UI, Material Design from Google, and the Material theme they have overlap, but they have nothing to do with each other. These are all different things. Material UI is now known as MUI, was meant to make it easy to add the Google Material Design look to your products and projects by being a component library. And this was one of the most popular component libraries in the React world for a while. You would use their button component, and it would have variants. The variants would render in different ways. It handled all of the parts. It had the behaviors. So if you use their checkbox or you use their, I want to drop down, cool, their select. Use their select component. It does this, and I hate that the age thing moving up after you click it the first time. What? Weird. If you want to change that, good luck, have fun. They built this with a lot of opinions, and those opinions aged in various different ways. Material UI is not something I could confidently recommend at the time, and I said that pretty strictly. Because with MUI, you ended up in the middle here. And since they built all of the parts themselves, MUI had behaviors that were worse than Radix, style primitives that were worse than Tailwind, and appearance that was, I would argue, even worse than Bootstrap. I hated the way it looked, and I hated working in it. And the few people who stuck with MUI ended up rebuilding their own style solutions around it because they needed to make it decent. And the problem with adopting one of these solutions that solves all of the problems itself is that it never solves them particularly well. Whenever somebody promises they can do what all these other tools do at once, there's a good chance they're either using those tools or they are lying and doing a bad job at it. And as such, Material UI was dying. Thankfully, they recognized that. One of the main inspirations for me doing this video was a project I found recently, Base UI. Move this so you can see it. Base UI is an open source library of accessible, unstyled UI components for React. Interesting. Turns out, the thing they were doing with Material UI is causing problems. And as such, they put together a team of pretty good people to build their own unstyled component library, very similar to Radix. This project isn't new. You'll see here there are commits from over a year ago. But it was new to me early last year when I first heard about it, and it's what got me thinking about this video. It was really cool to see that the MUI guys finally acknowledged the fact these all-in-one solutions are bad and shouldn't be the thing that we all strive towards. And they went even further now with Pigment CSS, which is their attempt to do an extension of CSS. It is CSS and JS, but they claim zero runtime. Interesting, but it's because they're doing it at build time. I don't think CSS and JS is the right way to phrase it. It is what it is. The thing that makes this all cool is that it is a better way to do compartmentalized styles in your applications. And rather than assume that the guys who built MUI are really, really good at styling and will know all the things better than you, and if you want something a different color, that's your fault and the skill issue, they actually let you write CSS again, which is cool. And now you can basically build your own MUI using these parts. There's a reason that they were so willing to do this, and it's not because they just suddenly magically realized the way they were building before was wrong and it was time to switch. It's because another, I don't even know if I can call it a library, another style solution, I will say, started to catch on. And it's one a lot of you guys have probably heard about, probably even seen me cover in videos. ShadCN UI. Build your component library. The thing that makes ShadCN so different isn't really one thing, it's a handful of things. Unlike the other all-in-one solutions that give you components, ShadCN components aren't replacing Tailwind, replacing Radix, or replacing Bootstrap. They're using Radix and Tailwind. These are the core pieces that are used to power most of the components within ShadCN. And then other ones that are more behavioral, like toasts and whatnot, those come from other packages too. And when you install it, you're not npm installing ShadCN. When you want to expose your code base, you actually do it very differently. If I want to grab, I don't know, let's say I want to use the button component. First, they show you how to init it in your project, which creates a components JSON file, which allows for ShadCN to know where the components are and what properties they should expect. And if we go into, let's say I want the alert component, I can click the code tab to see how they're using it. More importantly, I can run this command and it adds it to my code base. Not it installs the ShadCN alert package, but it copies the files necessary for the alert component into /source/components in my code base, and it will install any of the dependencies it needs. So if you don't already have class variance authority, it'll install that. I don't think this one needs anything else, thankfully, but some of the others do. Things like the checkbox component almost certainly is going to need some other stuff. Yeah, this grabs some stuff from Radix and from Lucid for the icons. It is using these other opinionated pieces that are built by industry experts and assembling them into the thing you would have had to build yourself. When I did my original video on this, what I said was the best developers trying to make a composable, custom, maintainable solution that uses the right parts would have to roll their own in the middle here by manually grabbing the right pieces from these different parts and probably hiring somebody to do this part for them or being a god designer themselves. What's really cool about ShadCN is it's effectively done that for you. It's went through and done the research and put in the effort to grab the parts from Radix and other libraries like it that are useful for building a good component library. It uses Tailwind as its base in order to make it good for styling. It also adds the parts that make it more dynamic. Class Variance Authority is a great example where it lets you apply different variants of the Tailwind classes dynamically at runtime, which is awesome. And it solves some of the Tailwind problems of how do you have different types of the same button with some classes that are the same and some that are different. It's so cool to see that the new default, the thing people reach for when they're learning or they're building a big app, it doesn't really matter. The thing that they're often being recommended now is ShadCN. And ShadCN, unlike other solutions, isn't going to lock them in because it's code that exists in their code base. But it also is code that comes with style opinions that are pretty damn good. It's a weird in-between of something like Bootstrap, something like Material UI, and then also all of the primitives that we've talked about in the past. It kind of confirms my hypothesis from the video from almost 3 years ago, which is we need good solutions that combine the parts. ShadCN combined the parts and gave us the solution, and the result is awesome. But Theo, doesn't that mean every ShadCN site's going to look exactly the same? Yeah, it does. And as you can see, if we go to t3.chat, it looks exactly the same as every other ShadCN site. Wait, that doesn't look like this. Maybe the dash? No. I thought every ShadCN site looked the same. Oh, I forgot. The code exists in my code base, so I could change it. This is what people don't seem to understand about ShadCN. This is what I love so much about it. You don't have to use the exact styles it comes with when you copy the code. It's awesome that when you use ShadCN components or you use a tool like V0 or Bolt that's using ShadCN as its default layer, that it will look fine by default. But if you want to change it, you can just go change it. Another great example just came up in chat here. The Neo-Brutalism components. This is a set of components that are based on ShadCN. So they're using ShadCN as the starting point. But I guess they look a little different. I mean, this slider looks basically identical to... Yeah, clearly these look exactly the same. There's nothing changed at all between those. Or if we look at the accordion, that's identical to the accordion that already exists in ShadCN. There's no difference at all because all of these look exactly the same. Oh, wait. That's entirely different. Crazy how when you give people the code for the thing, they can make it look differently because they have the code in their code base. And ShadCN's CLI for all of this was written in a generic enough way that you can run it, add components from other sources. You can run the same ShadCN command to add this component of an accordion instead of the one that ShadCN has. It's so cool. We now have open source component layers that are being built. It's awesome. And it's allowed for levels of like innovation and flexibility without lock-in in a way I've never seen. If you started your project back in 2020 using MUI, you either are stuck with your thing always looking like MUI, or you're hacking the hell out of it to try and make it look different. If you had started with ShadCN, you can just change it. That's so cool. And that's why it's the default everything reaches for now. Be it a developer getting started, a company building a design system architecture, or an AI bot generating you a new app. It makes so much sense that we say every site looks the same now because the defaults are so good, people will just use them and go far with them. But the moment they're ready to change it, super easy to do. We're getting more examples of things that don't look like ShadCN but are. Oh, yeah, this is a great example. This does not look like ShadCN in the slightest because, again, ShadCN comes with a light style layer because it's components, but you can just swap that part out whenever you want. It's so awesome that something like this can be built with ShadCN and look nothing like it at all. I love that. I'm following this person because that is really good. The one concern I see a lot with ShadCN, usually for people who haven't used it, is what about maintaining it? This seems like it's only good for big companies. I'm a small company. I need to make sure that I'm on the latest version or I might have issues. The complexity here, the thing that's changing isn't the 10 lines of code here that are wrapping the checkbox primitive from Radix UI. That's not where the complexity is. And if updates were to happen, they're not happening here. That's not the part that needs to change. The part that needs to change is this part. It has a dependency. You can go bump that dependency. Problem is, if you're using a different solution that bakes all of these parts in, and one of them has a problem, you have to update the whole thing. And if you have a user with an accessibility issue that got fixed 2 major versions in the future of Material UI, but when you bump it up, all of your random hacks around it break, you're screwed. That's gone now. It's so much more maintainable. The fact that this exists in my code means that the thing that has to be updated is a much more granular piece. It also means that our package JSON looks a little worse, sure, because we have to install all the different Radix parts that we use. So like, yeah, I have this instead of at Material UI. Oh no, I have so many packages. I must be a terrible developer. Why am I just npm installing all my solutions to my problems instead of building them myself? Because accessibility is hard, and you shouldn't be stuck trying to fix all the weird keyboard navigation behaviors that all these other library authors are stuck dealing with now too. The problem's solved. And if you need to bump one of these things, you just bump the one thing. I can go bump from 214 to 216 on React dropdown menu and it's fine. I don't get why people care so much. I really don't. As for what happens if they change the styles in ShadCN, you go copy paste it. And if you had customization and they changed it, cool, you customize it. You don't need the change anyways. I just don't get this at all. They also have a change log at the bottom of each component that tells you what's changed about this component since it came out. And since button dropped, which is one of the first components ever added to ShadCN, the only thing they've changed in their code is they added this for handling icons inside of the button automatically. So if you pass it an SVG and you want it to automatically make it an icon SVG, cool. That's now part of it by default. That's awesome. I love they did that. But if you're missing that, whatever. Who cares? And chances are, if you customized it, you're probably doing your own icon handling anyways. Apparently, they even have a CLI you can run automatically handle these upgrades. That's cool. I don't even think you need to use that because the stuff doesn't change a whole lot, but it's really cool. You don't need to worry about these things. This is the benefit of modularity is when a part needs to change, you can change the part. Thing needs to be updated, you can update the thing. Just update it. Styles and the code living in your code base is not the part that needs to change. It's the part you can change if you want to change it. If you want to have different styles, awesome, do it. But it is not like, oh, React 19 came out, now I have to go update everything. It doesn't work that way. We've been using these components for years in some of our code bases, and they don't change. They don't get touched. Most of the /UI folder in the upload thing code base was committed 2 years ago. We might bump the Radix versions. Who cares about the rest? That's what's awesome about it. You can change it when you need to and not change it when you don't. Whereas if I need to update Material UI and they made a change to what props you pass to components, I have to go audit my entire goddamn code base in order to bump that version. It's a fundamentally different world. Modular is always more maintainable. Always. And I don't fathom how anyone can see it differently. It's just hard for me to comprehend. So it's happened. ShadCN is the perfect thing in the middle here. It is the thing I wanted when I filmed my last video. Most of that video was me just complaining that the solutions in the middle were bad because they didn't take advantage of all the awesome technologies in the other circles. Now we have something in the middle, which is where we want to be, that uses the best of each part and lets you swap out the style system part whenever you feel like, however you want to. It's so cool. Notice how people don't talk about chakra or styled components or any of those things anymore. I can't remember the last time I heard anyone talking about chakra. People were so mad at me at the time for daring to say, I don't see chakra going anywhere. Certainly didn't. No fault of the devs. They were doing something that seemed to make a lot of sense at the time. But I saw where we were going as an industry, and it was clearly not towards all-in-one solutions. And nowadays, I get a lot of messages like this. Mantine is still my go-to when I'm not using Tailwind and ShadCN. Nowadays, if somebody's using something other than Tailwind and ShadCN, it almost feels like they have to qualify it because it's become such a hard default. And even Chakra has moved away from their monolithic way of doing things and thinking towards breaking it up into individual parts. In Chakra v3, we're unifying our ecosystem of tools by combining the headless library, ArcUI, with the styling APIs in Panda CSS, and then using ParkUI as the design system. They're just a new version of ShadCN with worse components. Kind of wild. I have no idea what ParkUI is. Build your own design system. Oh, look at that. We've all centralized on this idea because it's the right idea. This page also has overscroll disabled, which is a huge, huge red flag for me because it breaks a bunch of random shit. Yeah, they have it fully disabled on here. Very interesting. Very interesting. As an industry, we've accepted that a solution pretending to solve all of these problems isn't good enough because we're going to have problems with any one corner, and we want the best in class for the different corners. Not giving that level of flexibility is a death sentence for the maintainability of things. It's awesome to see the entire industry recognize that Radix is really good, Tailwind is really good, and your styles themselves are a separate thing. And rather than pretend all of these are just one package you should install, that we should actually treat them as separate. It feels like acknowledgement of the component revolution for the first time in a long time. The biggest thing we've had to jump through is the idea that CSS, the vanilla way, was the only right way to think about styles, and that Cascade is a good thing. Now that we've accepted that Cascade is a shit show for maintenance, and components are the only viable way to ship web applications at scale, we have slowly unbuilt and rebuilt the world around them so that we're not so tied to vanilla CSS, and we are now in a much better place where our systems for how we style our apps are as modular as the components that we're building in the first place. It was a very bad thing that our components were modular in our logic, but were very much not modular and able to be mucked around with when it came to how they looked and how they composed. We have moved away from that as an industry, and I'm so thankful that we did. The future of styles is much brighter now that we have awesome things like ShadCN, and I don't see us going back. There are catches, there are problems. ShadCN makes it easier to fix the problems when you run into them, but it doesn't hold your hand the whole way there either. It's a really interesting in-between, but it's an in-between that won. And I really don't see that changing anytime soon. Especially now that we're in a world where a random dev or non-dev at your company might want to go change how a thing looks. If the component library you're using doesn't allow it, they're screwed. If the components are just other things in the code base, they can do whatever they want. And the magical feeling that I have today when I go into my code base and sneak over to my source front-end components file and see all of these ShadCN components that we didn't write, but we did restyle, and we have adjusted to fit our needs better. We have a real design system here in our code base now. And that's so cool that ShadCN helps us get there earlier, where we have a folder we own that is how we build our components and how we structure our application. And as we need to change it, we can. That balance of snap your fingers, you have a component library. Oh, you want to change it? Just go change it. That was something you had to do yourself before, and it no longer is. And that's such a cool transition for this industry to make. And I am genuinely really excited to see how far we can go with this now that we're in this awesome world where everyone is trying to make a composable modular solution. Death to Material UI, death to Bootstrap. The future is a much more modular world where the complexity of our apps can actually be met with systems that are simple to get started and flexible enough to scale with our increasing ambitions with the projects that we build. I am so hyped to see these changes, and I hope you guys are too. What do you think? Is this the future, or are we just doing one of those back and forths? We'll right back to component libraries like we were before. Let me know. Until next time, peace, nerds.